Welcome back to the Cover 2 Zone. We are here for the Week 11 review and the Week 12 preview. Hard to believe we're this far into the season. I don't want it to end just yet. And it's getting into the winter months now where those northern teams are going to start to have the weather in their favour, and it's going to be a factor, isn't it, the weather, probably from now on, would you say?
Yeah, probably, although year on year, it seems more and more teams are playing inside under domes.
Yeah.
How many years before we get to the point where the weather is just not a factor at all? I don't know.
Yeah, and I know we are a American football podcast, but I have a fever at the moment, and it's Ashes fever, which just kicked off last night in Australia. You're not a cricket fan, really, are you? You like more sports, but cricket's not one of them for you, is it?
Yeah, cricket's not. You're quite right. It's not one for me, and I've gotten in trouble before for saying that it's not a sport if you play it wearing trousers. So it's my opinion. Cricket, darts,
golf. So golf's not a sport.
Oh, yeah, it's a hobby.
You could argue that American footballers play in trousers.
If anything, they're more like tights. But let's not get into.
They got into the weeds of that. The first game up, we are going to review. The Denver Broncos 22, the Kansas City Chiefs 19. A huge matchup this in the AFC West. Going into it, we knew how important this game could be in deciding this division when it's all said and done. The Broncos could have taken charge of the division, and they absolutely did so, didn't they? A huge win for them. They moved to 9-2. The Chiefs fall to 5-5, which doesn't seem like it should be the case at all. It's un-Chief-like, isn't it, at this point of the season? And the Broncos extend their winning streak to 8 now.
Yeah, you're quite right. It is un-Chief-like, and much like when the Patriots sort of fell off from their dynasty, I think the American football world is loving this, right? Everyone is happy to see the Chiefs not quite look the same as they used to. And I say that because they're still a very good team. They're 5-5. And I don't think anyone can count them out from going on a 7-game win streak to finish the season and, it being a quality playoff team. So, it's difficult. But I think what it does do, and I liked this week of the season because of quite a few teams sort of proved their point. It proves that the Broncos are a real deal team this year,
Well, that was going to be one of my questions later on. We'll get into that in a second. Just to not to throw too much of a tangent in there and get off topic from reviewing the game, but when you said about the Chiefs, or when we said about it's un-Chief-like, I was thinking earlier, if somebody asked me right now to predict my playoff teams, I had a little think about it, and I put the Chiefs, the Bills, and the Ravens in as my wild card teams in the AFC, which before the season, if you had said those 3 teams will be the wild card spots, you would have had a good odds on that from the bookies, I bet. But I think that is a realistic possibility at this point. And we won't get too off tangent. We'll go back to the game in a sec. But do you think that as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think you'd be on for a winner for saying that all 3 of those teams will make the playoffs. And as of right now, they're not sitting in division winner spots. So I guess that's how it would fall out. I still think one of the 3 of them will probably end up winning a division. And we might talk about that a little bit later on when we get to that team. But yeah, I think pre-season we'd have expected them all to win their divisions without much question. And so it's, from a fan of another team, any other team, doesn't really matter what any of the other 29 teams, it's quite enjoyable to see all 3 struggle a little bit. Yeah,
especially when, for me and you, 2 of those teams are our division rivals.
Exactly. And the other one's at NFL dynasty level of it.
Yeah, exactly. This game, back to the game, bit of a cagey start in this game from both offenses. We knew it would be a defensively heavy game going into it. Obviously, the Broncos, really good defense under Vance Joseph and Steve Spagnuolo as well, one of the best DCs in the league for the Chiefs. And it took until the third quarter to get the first touchdown in this game. And the Chiefs actually outscored the Broncos in this game in terms of touchdowns, 2-1. But the Broncos special teams unit made the difference in this game, didn't he? Will Lutz hit five of 5 field goals and an extra point. Marvin Mims with a big return got the Broncos into good position, and a field goal block as well, which was a huge turning point, it felt like, in the game. So the Broncos at the moment are firing on all cylinders, aren't they?
Yeah, and you're right. It was a game for fans of kicking. The sort of game where there's 2 kickers there that could have won you a fantasy football week, which it just sort of never happens, really. And I think you're right. I think the Broncos are clicking well. It takes them a little while to get going. They've not scored a touchdown on the first drive in 9 straight games. It takes them time as an offense to get moving, but once they're moving, they're really quite difficult to slow down. That said, only 59 rushing yards by the Broncos today. Well, not today. This weekend just gone. That's not a good stat from a team that is normally quite well balanced.
Yeah, I was going to say that the Broncos are, again, they're not a flashy offense by any means, are they? They're a methodical offense that is just going to take their time down the field. As you said, they usually mix run and pass pretty well. They don't really make too many big splashy plays down the field. It's 10, 15-yard gains, a few runs here, 4, 5 yard, 6 yard runs. But one thing I do want to highlight, that one of 5 in the red zone in this game for the Broncos. Is that a concern going into the run-in of the end of the regular season? And we presume they're going to make the playoffs in some capacity from the position that they're in. Not being able to convert in the red zone, is that going to be an issue for the Broncos, do you think?
Yeah, it could be. It certainly doesn't look good. They came away with points, which is, can be all that matters. And as we said earlier, they have a defense that really does play very, very well. And the old language is defense wins championships. So, they're keeping other teams close. But in an AFC championship game, if you only really score field goals, that's not a good job, is it?
Well, Tony Romo said on the call in this game that it felt like a playoff game. And I agreed with him on that. It was cagey. It was tense. I think the 2 teams knew what was on the line, really, in this game. The Chiefs knowing how good the Broncos were and how much of a lead they had in the division. Chiefs now 5-5, which we've already said feels strange, and it feels especially strange when you've outscored an opponent in terms of touchdowns and you've still lost the game. I was looking at the stats, and I don't actually think the Chiefs played badly on both fronts, and you look at the stats throughout the season. Their offense is in the top 10, the defense is in the top 10, and their special teams are in the top 10, and yet they're still 5-5. And this felt like a game where I don't quite know how the Chiefs have lost it. Special teams, I guess, on the day, but it was a weird one, wasn't it?
Yeah, and you say it's very even game. 62 plays for the Broncos, 63 plays for the Chiefs, 5.6 yards per play, 5 yards per play. They're very, very close the whole game. And it could be that huge punt return by Marvin Mims gets them in range for a field goal. That's a 3-point difference, and that's the game. It could be McMillan's 2 sacks and an interception that make the difference. It's people standing up, individuals maybe, that won this game for the Broncos, because both teams played very well.
Yeah, you kind of brought it up just as we got into this game. It's the Broncos' division to lose now after that win. Do you think they're legit now? as he takes a sip to have a minute to think about his answer.
Yeah, I think legit's maybe a bit far. I don't see this team making a deep playoff run. But you're quite right. For them to lose this division now, they've got to really throw it away. They've got to have a very bad run of events or some really poor luck with injuries or something like that to lose this division from this point in. So, they're in a good spot. And I think the AFC is in a position at the moment where you could see them potentially somehow sneaking the bye week spot and finding themselves in the division round just by, teams losing and falling off,
They're one of the front runners for it right now, in the position that they are. I agree with you. I've said it kind of all along. I'm very hesitant to jump on the Broncos bandwagon just because of the lack of real kick in their offense and star power in their offense. As we said, with the red zone, 1 of 5 in the red zone. Yes, their defense is very, very good, and will keep them in a lot of games. But I think even if they don't have a deep playoff run this year, even if they don't end up doing anything, Sean Payton has put this team in such a good position where they've got the base to go forward next year. And if they can add a few star-studded players, if they can add some star power in free agency or through trades or whatever in the off-season, then they could start to put together a real Super Bowl caliber team. But I think they do lack that star power, especially on offense.
Yeah, I'd probably agree. But they have foundational pieces now. They've got a quarterback that I think you can build around and make a team that works.
Yeah.
He's not going to be a top 5 guy. He's probably not going to be in MVP discussions in his career. But
he doesn't make mistakes, right? He keeps you in the game, and he works the ball down the field, and he looks after the football, right? And that's a guy around, like a Matt Stafford guy isn't gonna, a Jared Goff. They're not going to make real flashy plays like Lamar Jackson or Patrick Mahomes, but they're going to drive the ball down the field. They're going to largely look after the football, and they're going to play sensible and smart football.
Exactly. And with the defense that's keeping them in games, he finish games for them when they need to, which is, a really good spot for the team to be in.
Moving on to the second game then, the Cleveland Browns 16, the Baltimore Ravens 23. The Ravens back to 500 as they look to save their season. The Browns drop to 2-8. And for the first time this season in this game, we saw Shedeur Sanders. And boy, was it a rude awakening for him in the league. 4 of 16, 47 yards and an interception, a quarterback rating of 13.5. And all I'm saying is, can we get a Dion Cam for the next game? Because I'd love to see what Coach Prime is making of his son's entrance into the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, it probably wasn't a good spot to put him into the game in. But Gabriel was being booed by the fans by half time. But if you look at the stat sheet, Gabriel's 7 of 10 for 68 yards and gets sacked once in this game. Sanders is 4 of 16 for 47 yards. Like, Gabriel played better in the first half than Sanders did in the second. Yeah, I think as a team, they've made bad quarterback decisions for a very long time. And they're not in a position to improve that at the moment. But we needed to see Sanders at some point this season. We needed to see what he offers. I believe he's starting this week coming. And that will tell us a lot more with a week's prep and reps with the start.
I said all that at the start, and I was being a bit divisive there because when I watched this game back, I'm going to step in and defend him because I thought he didn't actually play that badly, as the stats would suggest. When he came into the game, the Ravens ramped up the pressure on him. His offensive line did not help him. They did not deal with the pressure well. I mean, the pick he throws, he gets absolutely drilled. But he stands. It's a bad throw, but he stands in the pocket. He takes the hit, right, which is what, as an NFL quarterback, you're meant to do. His offensive line did not help him, as I said, in pass blocking. He was forced out of the pocket many times, which is essentially what he does well, right? He's a running quarterback, and we saw that a few times. He was able to escape out and make a good couple of yards. And I think that's what the Browns want him to do. He's not a pocket passer. They want him to be this hybrid quarterback that they can get. But it was too much, and there was pressure from both sides. And in your first NFL game, you're not going to get it right. I thought he grew into the game as he got in, and he could have had a really spectacular throw for a touchdown. It was dropped by the receiver. I forget who it was, and pretty good coverage in the end. But I thought he grew into it, and put, as you said, put in a bad spot. And I don't think the stats quite painted the picture of his performance. And I am looking forward to seeing him start this week with a clean slate and see how he gets on.
Yeah. I think that's probably the fair way of looking at it. I think this is a game that, for me, celebrated Mark Andrews in a really weird way. They announced early on that one of the completions to him made him the all-time Ravens leader in receiving yards. He scores that lovely trick play touchdown that I couldn't work out if it was a trick play or an accident, but either way it worked. And I think, the Ravens got lucky a couple of times, maybe. There's a punt in the second quarter that doesn't cause too many problems. With 4 minutes and 59 remaining, it's tied up at 16 all, and it could have gone either way really from there, I think.
I think the Ravens defense seems to be finally showing up, doesn't it, this season? And yes, this is a Browns offense that's not very good. We know that, but it was an improved performance, especially when Shador came in and they brought the pressure and they were able to get there. The offense was, again, for the Ravens, wasn't the best game. Lamar did not have his best game. We'll talk about 95 in a second and his performance. But it is getting there, you feel. Zay Flowers had a pretty good day, 78 yards off 3 catches. And Derrick Henry had a much better game, 103 yards, 18 carries and a touchdown as well. So getting him more involved. So I do feel the Ravens are warming up, and this is a good Browns defense as well, it must be said.
Yeah, I mean, this is certainly, it was a game without much quality offense generally. I mean, the Browns went 2 of 14 on third down. No, the Ravens went 5 of 13 on third down. Not good, by any measure. And, Cleveland only had 187 total yards, which is very, very poor. So clearly the Ravens defense is stepping up in a way that their offense currently isn't matching. But hopefully they're starting to get there. And I mean, as you said, there's a player we need to talk about in a minute. There's another player I want to talk about first.
Okay.
Just sort of, I was watching the game and I thought to myself, I bet he holds a record. The kicker, Andre Schmidt, he probably holds the record in the NFL for least vowels in a surname. This is SZMYT. No vowels. No vowels anyway.
How has that thought even crept into your head?
I don't know.
You're a strange man.
I was like, what a weird surname. And then I thought to myself, I bet, yeah.
The NFL does throw up some spectacular names, doesn't it? Throughout the years, my favorite is still Barkevius Mingo. I just like the way it sounds. I just really like the way it sounds.
It is a good one. I mean, there's far too many of them to count. Yeah. I think the Brickashaw Ferguson's probably my favorite.
Ha Clinton Dix.
Another classic.
Let's talk about the elephant in the room then, and he's almost the size of an elephant in the best way possible. He's probably as strong as one. Myles Garrett, 4 sacks of Lamar Jackson, taking him to 15 on the season. I forget which 2 teams it is. I should have written that down, but he has more sacks than 2 teams do as a team currently. Do you know who they are?
I want to say it's the Bengals and the Titans.
Okay.
It's definitely the Bengals because they have 12 sacks as a team and he has 15. And I think the Titans have 13, but I'm not 100% sure. But it's also worth noting there's another 3 teams that have the same number of sacks as him. So, he's something else. And I think, the NFL record's 22 and a half sacks in a season. And he's on 50 with 7 games to play?
Yeah. He's on pace, isn't he?
Yeah.
Is he better than Aaron Donald? Was in his prime?
I think that's a very difficult question to answer. I think
it is.
Aaron Donald played somewhere between defensive tackle and defensive end, right? He wasn't a all-out pass rushing.
Yes.
Myles Garrett is an out-and-out defensive end.
Yeah.
So he probably combines all the best bits of Aaron Donald and all the best bits of a Von Miller and is somewhere in between. So it's very hard to compare them. But, if he breaks the NFL sack record, then go down as one of the best defensive players of all time. And certainly, on the same team sheet as Aaron Donald would be if you were sitting there making an all-time defense.
Well, the reason I'm asking as well is because the Rams are this week at the game giving out to fans the Aaron Donald GOAT bobblehead. And I'm wondering whether exactly if Myles Garrett continues in this vein, whether the Browns may be saying to the Rams, you might want to relinquish them because we've got a guy who's the GOAT and we'll hand out GOAT bobbleheads. Thank you very much. He's just... I can't even say anything anymore. The guy is just a freak of nature. How team, he must be being targeted as well. They must be putting in extra protection for him, and he still gets there. It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, he's being double teamed everywhere. He's being chipped off the line by a tight end, and they're keeping a running back in the backfield to try and stop him as well. But he's just something different, isn't he? And he'll go down certainly as the best Browns player.
Yeah.
But I mean, he probably was that about 5 years ago. So
yeah. We'll move on to the third game. We're going to review the Rams 21, the Seahawks 19. This was a mouth-watering clash coming into it. And it was as close as we expected. Probably not in the way that we expected, but it was close. Despite a rare, terrible day for Sam Darnold, it was pretty awful for him. But 2 really good teams, 2 of the league's leading receivers in Jackson Smith and Jigba and Puka Nacua in this game as well. The Rams now edge ahead in this hotly contested division as well. It was a game we were all looking forward to coming into the week. I think not just NFC West fans, and it delivered, didn't it? Even in the way that we probably didn't expect with Sam Darnold throwing 4 picks.
Yeah, I mean, I think I probably looked at this game and expected it to be a higher scoring, a bit more of a shootout. And yeah, it is a shame to see Sam Darnold playing like he did when he was at the Jets rather than, like we've seen in the last 2 years. But it was a very good game. I think there were a couple of really bad calls. Early on, 4th and inches, the Rams go for a play action pass instead of just running the ball. They're, 5 yards out. Luckily, the next play, they pick the ball off and end up 5 yards out again with a fresh set of downs. But, it was bad play calling there. The Rams could have set the game up quicker. And I think, they're 2 teams that have been very good from the start of the season and will both be in the playoffs, I have no doubt.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to seeing them play, hopefully, each other at some point in the playoffs.
Yeah.
That'll be quite a tasty matchup.
Yeah, and Kyron Williams had a big game, didn't he, in this one? 12 carries, 91 yards, and a touchdown. And especially early on in this game, he seemed to be gashing the Hawks defense. And you mentioned going for it on 4th down. McVay did this all day, really. They went for it on 4th and goal. Williams ran it in for a touchdown. They get another big run of 34 yards from Williams then on 4th and 1 at the end of the first quarter. So I guess from the luck that they'd had on 4th down early on in the game, McVay was like, okay, we're just going to keep going for it here, because he thought he had the Seahawks defense, up against the sword, really. But the Seahawks defense really improved in the second half, played really, really well in the second half, and kept them in it, really, as Darnold was just tossing the ball back to the Rams, seemingly every drive. Seahawks then, it was, when you look at the stats of this game, Sam Darnold has a lot of passing yards in this game and a lot of completions. It's obviously the interceptions that are the problem. And if there wasn't those 4 picks, it would be a decent game for Sam Darnold, because he was completing passes and they were moving the ball down the field. Walker and Charbonnet combined for a good amount of yards on the ground as well, but they just couldn't convert drives, could they? And as you said, just kept tossing the ball back to the Rams in bad positions.
Yeah, I mean, you're quite right. The Seahawks offense was motoring. They had 26 first downs in this game to the Rams 12 first downs. There's most of the stat lines you could read from this game, you'd say to yourself, how on earth did it end up finishing with a 2-point Rams win rather than, a 10-point Seahawks win? It's really sort of unfortunate. I think, a couple of guys played really, really well in this game. AJ Barner, 10 catches, 11 targets for 70 yards. I mean, 70 yards doesn't sound like a lot, but for a tight end, 10 of 11 is really, really good. And then Cameron Kitchens with 2 interceptions, backing up a big game from last week into this week. Really, really good to see.
Yeah, and he, I think he had, going into this game, before that first interception, he had 5 interceptions in his NFL career, 3 against Seattle. So he clearly likes playing against the Hawks. A decent day for Stafford, nothing to light up the stat sheet, but the Hawks D did their best to limit him, didn't they? This is a good defense at the end of the day. As we said, a day to forget for Darnold and the Hawks offense. But do you think it's just a blip against a good defense, and he'll bounce back again?
Yeah.
He's had a couple of sort of bad fantasy performance weeks this season. Whether due to interceptions or just, not firing properly. There is a ceiling with Sam Darnold, and it's always going to be there. And as a team, they need to call the right plays to take as much of the pressure off of him as possible. As I said, I think they're a playoff team. I don't think they're a team that will necessarily go all that far in the playoffs once they get there. But they are a good team, and I think Darnold, in recent years, has shown more good than bad. There is, as I say, that sort of when he was at the Jets level of play is still in him, unfortunately. And he's going to be the kind of quarterback that spends 2-3 years at one team and then moves on because they're always going to want to sort out a franchise option rather than him.
I really do rate this Seahawks team. However, the NFC this year is looking really strong. And every team that's going to be in the playoffs in the NFC is going to be probably a contender, to be quite honest with you, even the wildcard spots. So I think it's going to be a real dogfight in that NFC playoff bracket. So good teams are going to go out early, and the Seahawks might be one of them. You're quite right. We'll have to wait and see. They'll have to get there first. There's still a lot of work to do. This division is still pretty wide open. There's, I think, 3 teams on 7 wins, or Rams on 8 wins, and then the Hawks and the 49ers on 7 wins. So it's still all to play for. Moving on to the fourth game then, the Jacksonville Jaguars 35, the LA Chargers 6. A big comeback performance and win for the Jags after a disappointing few weeks. And a big loss for the Chargers, trying to keep pace with the Broncos in that AFC West. And it was a huge day for the Jags on the ground, 192 yards by Tootin, Etienne, Allen Jr. and Lawrence combined, 4 touchdowns as well. And the Chargers just had no answer, did they, for the Jags' rushing attack, and particularly as well the Jags' offensive line.
Yeah, I mean, the Chargers kind of looked like a non-factor in this game. They didn't
concerning,
look
concerning.
off the bus, essentially, and you're quite right that Jags offensive line today. I mean, Trevor Lawrence's touchdown, if you see the behind view camera, just opens up wide.
Also, if you watch Tootin's touchdown in the second half where he gets to the pylon, watch right guard Robert Hainsey pull from and just latch on to Deion Henley and just drive him into the pylon. It's if you know the albums, Now That's What I Call Music, that's what I call blocking, because it was tremendous. I replayed it about 10 times, honestly. It was just, he just latches on to, Deion Henley's a great linebacker as well. He is no mug, and he just absolutely bullies him. It was phenomenal from the Jags. And, this is the Chargers do have injuries. There's no doubt, especially at running back, and offensive line as well. I'll come on to their offensive line in a bit, but they did look really bad in this, especially the defense, didn't they?
Yeah, defensively, offensively, obviously they don't score a point after the 22nd minute of the game. The Chargers finished with a total of 135 yards on 45 plays, which is 42 rushing yards and a stat line from Herbert of 10 of 18 for 81 yards, an interception, and getting sacked twice. It's really bad. The Jags rushing alone have more yards than the Chargers the entire game. I think Jacoby Myers, 5 of 6 for 64 yards. A big impact from a guy who's recently been traded for. You don't normally see receivers gel in that early. Another player that I want to mention for a name perspective, because I'm on that trend today, is the guy with the most PGA Tour video game regen sounding name ever, Tim Patrick. It's just a made up name. It's an Australian guy that nobody's ever.
Yeah, he used to be on the Broncos, I think, didn't he? Yeah. And I was watching it and I was like, Patrick, I was like, I know that guy used to be on the Broncos, and I couldn't remember his first name. And this is a niche reference, but I kept thinking his name was Omari Patrick. Omari Patrick is a winger who plays for Tranmere Rovers and used to play for Sutton United. So I was getting those two mixed up. Both quality athletes, of course, and at the top of their game in League Two and in the NFL, respectively. But yeah, no, you are right. It is a strange. It's my friend always used to have a problem, and it's weird because it's not the person's fault at all. But he always used to hate people who had two first names, like a brand, like John Oliver or something like that. He's like, how can you have Oliver as a second name? That's the first name, blah, blah. And he always used to have a problem. And Tim Patrick's the same, right?
I'd say I can imagine sitting there playing the PGA Tour game and losing at Augusta to Tim Patrick. I can just feel it.
You've been playing too much PGA Tour, mate. If that's the front and center of your mind. Herbert, I think in this game looked a really lonely figure at times. He's a pocket passer, isn't he? And there was times he had to get out of the pocket. I want to read you this sort of line that I heard, and I don't know. I didn't verify it. I just saw it somewhere online. That all 5 of the Chargers starting O-line, and we know they are banged up on the O-line. Joe Alt is out. Rashawn Slater got injured at the start of the season, so they are on second and third string offensive linemen. But apparently, all 5 of their starting 5 for this game were ranked in the bottom 5 of their positions by PFF. So it's not, especially when you haven't got your first and second string running back either. It's a tough one, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think Keenan Allen looked pretty good in this game. He dropped 1 in contact, but other than that, he did his best to help out. But yeah, there's not a lot you can do in the NFL if you've not got a healthy, quality offensive line. There's not a lot you can move the ball. But yeah, as we said earlier, defensively, they also didn't look like they were doing anything at all. Yeah. And what another thing, things keep popping into my head today. Another thing that really annoyed me about this, watching the highlights, is the last 7 minutes of the game aren't in the highlights. It gets to 7 minutes left and it just cuts to the end.
I was saying this in our chat earlier. There are so many mistakes in the NFL highlight packages where they're either cutting plays short or they're putting the play in the wrong place, or then they replay one twice. And I get that you need to get the highlights out quickly so people can see them before they see the result or whatever. I get that it's about speed. But come on, guys. This is the NFL. Check your work. There's at least one mistake in every highlights package I watch.
Yeah, to be fair, as I say, it was 35-6 with 7 minutes left, and clearly both teams just ran the ball a couple of times and the game ended. So I can understand skipping it. When you try and rewatch a game to get something to talk about, it's kind of like...
Are the Chargers in danger of fading away in this season? Because... it was a really strong start, and they've been really off the boil in the last few weeks, obviously impacted by the injuries, but they also haven't played that well. Are they in danger of really fading away, especially in that tough division?
I think they're practically already out of it with the Broncos where the Broncos are, and the fact that the Chiefs will have a little run to the back end of the season. I think that the Chargers are in a spot where this season, I think another loss, whenever it comes, is this season essentially.
Wow, big call.
But equally, Herbert's obviously a franchise quarterback. Harbaugh's got money in the bank. They're not going to be moving on from any of the key pieces anywhere in this system. So it almost feels weird to say that they're out of it, because most teams, when they're looking like they're out of it, they're going to be, cutting loose with a load of things. Just a very strange team this year. Yeah,
definitely one to keep an eye on. Moving on to the last game in the review section, the Vikings 17, the Bears 19. I mean, every NFC North game this year feels big, especially right now. And I was looking at the schedules of the NFC North teams earlier, and I'll come to this in a sec, but or in the preview section, sorry. But a lot of them haven't actually played each other, so there's a lot of NFC matchups still to come. The Bears go first in the division with this win, 3 wins in a row for them as well, 7-3 record now. And I don't know about you, Ollie. I'm feeling the Bears. I am on dark horse alert here. Feels to me like Ben Johnson's offense is coming together. The defense takes the ball away from the opponent for this offense. They give their own now, who are starting to warm up and can convert these turnovers into points. And I have a good feeling about the Bears. I'm on the train. I've got 1 foot on the train. Not saying they're going to win the Super Bowl or anything like that, but I have got 1 foot on the Bears train at the moment.
I don't.
Of course you don't.
I feel like the Bears are one of those scrappy, lucky teams that they seem to get away with it. Today, obviously it's 16-3 at the start of the fourth quarter. Everything tells you, cool, the Bears are winning this game. I can switch off here, whatever. And then suddenly it's 17-16 and the Vikings are winning. And Duvernay breaks off a big kick return, puts them in field goal range. Kairos Santos is probably only about 6 inches inside the left upright on kicking that field goal.
Yeah, it was close.
But that felt like the kind of thing where, Bears fans at home are tearing their hair out going, how the hell have we thrown this away? And then suddenly they just sort of get out of it. I don't know. I think watching this game, the thing that struck me is Caleb Williams just keeping plays alive. Just not going down when he thought he was going to get sacked, just doing things to just keep the things that we used to, rave about Patrick Mahomes doing and Aaron Rodgers doing, and then and I think that's probably the first time that I've watched a Bears game and thought Caleb Williams actually looked like he was adding to the team as opposed to just sort of being part of the team. So that was quite, that's quite a positive thing to say, I suppose.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, it was a big game for DeAndre Swift, and I actually have written down here, big game for DeAndre Swift, even when Caleb doesn't have his best game. I mean, early on in this game, he overthrew a few balls sometimes that were there. They had separation from the receivers, overthrew it. But I do think you're right. He grew into the game, and he is starting to add to this Bears offense. I agree. And that's kind of what I mean about not just him, but this entire Bears offense seems to now be molding itself around Ben Johnson's offense, and it seems to be clicking a little bit more. Just on the there was an emotional moment as well. No Sean Wright spectacularly picked off JJ McCarthy in the end zone, and he took a knee in memory of his late coach John Beam, who people will know from the Last Chance U series at Laney College, and Coach Beam was obviously the feature coach on that, and was shot and killed on Laney campus earlier on this week, which is obviously a devastating news to hear. And yeah, it was an emotional one for No Sean Wright, wasn't it? And he was on the Vikings practice squad last year as well, which is crazy to think. And he's now starting for the Bears against them and picking off JJ McCarthy.
Yeah, and Coach Beam has quite a link to the British American football, system. He spent normally at least a week a year coming over here, working with the SGS Pride coaches, the
NFL Academy, I think, as well, right? But Loughborough as well, right? Yeah.
When they formed up, but he was coming to the Pride before then, clearly, a very good coach and someone who had, a lot to give to players. So, yeah.
Moving on to the Vikings, I mean, we've talked earlier about Kevin O'Connell's ability to get the best out of his quarterbacks, whoever is in there. Did it with Kirk Cousins, then did it with Sam Darnold. Seems to be struggling a little bit more with JJ McCarthy. And I know, do you think that's because of JJ McCarthy's injuries that he's had is potentially holding him back? Or is there something more here that's an issue?
I think maybe the difference is, and I'm not slighting McCarthy here, is a level of maturity. I think every other quarterback that's come into this Vikings team and this Vikings setup has come in having spent multiple years elsewhere in the NFL, either as a starter or as a backup. But they've had time to develop as an NFL player and then mesh into the system. Whereas McCarthy's not had the time to develop in the NFL totally. So, whether it's a case of he's good at adapting other people's players that have got started and maybe not so much this guy who is essentially a rookie. I know he was in the league last year, I don't think you can count his rookie season. So for a rookie, he is playing at quite a high level. This weekend was not a great weekend for him. 150 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions, and he did look shaky. But I think there's more to come from him.
Yeah, and as we mentioned, the Vikings went up by 1 with 50 seconds to go in this game, and then they let Devin Duvernay return the kickoff within field goal range, and that's just criminal, isn't it? You cannot do that with 50. I know the kickoff rules this year are different, and it's opening up the field to more big returns, but when you've just got to bring the guy down and see out the clock.
Yeah, I mean, it's the sort of thing that, coaches, special teams coordinators on the sideline will be just like, that'll be that headset off, going into the locker room. I can't be stood here right now because I'll say something I shouldn't to my players, right? The Vikings just sort of let it go, and it's crushing. But equally, at the start of the fourth, they were down 16-3. They didn't deserve to win the game based on how the rest of the game had played. So hard to do.
Yeah, and let's run you through the rest of the Week 11 results before we move on to the preview. The Patriots beat the Jets 27-14 on Thursday Night Football to extend their amazing run, really, at the top now of the AFC East. The Dolphins beat the Commanders in overtime in Madrid, 16-13. The Giants fall to the Packers, 20-27. The Texans beat the Titans 16-13, close one there. The Panthers beat the Falcons 30-20. The Bills beat the Bucks 44-32, an absolute shootout there in Buffalo. The Steelers beat the Bengals 34-12. The Cardinals fall to the 49ers 22-41. The Eagles beat the Lions 16-9, low scoring one there on Sunday Night Football. And then on Monday Night Football, the Cowboys beat the Raiders 33-16. So moving on to Week 12, the first game in the preview, the Kansas City Chiefs against the Indianapolis Colts. And this is another massive game for the Chiefs in the AFC. Big game for the Colts as well, but second successive game for the Chiefs against one of the surprise packages of this season. I mean, the Broncos maybe not so much of a surprise package, but the Colts definitely are. And for me, this feels like a must-win for the Chiefs. 5-5 already at the moment. Another AFC playoff rival here, and they need to get going now, don't they? If they are going to make the playoffs.
Yeah, I think you're quite right. It's one of those games that the Colts can afford to lose, and the Chiefs really can't afford to at all. I think. Yeah. It's a real tester for the Colts, though. Their division's not overly strong. And so have they had proper testing games this season? I think they have. I think they've had quite a hard schedule. But when the Chiefs come to town, or they go to the Chiefs, can't remember which way around it is.
It's at Arrowhead, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's a hard place to win. It's a hard place for anyone to win. So I think the Colts might struggle there. And I think it's hard, probably unfair to say, but are we watching the wheels come off a little bit with Daniel Jones? Have the rest of the team and the rest of the league started to work out how Daniel Jones is playing? 4 interceptions in the last 2 games. That's not a good stat for any quarterback. And he's obviously a confidence guy, and when his confidence is high, he plays very well. Are those 4 interceptions going to slow him down, do we think?
Well, interesting take. I mean, they're coming in off the bye week this week, which does help. You can rest up. You can watch that game last weekend and see what the Broncos did against the Chiefs, right? And I think Daniel Jones will be fine, especially when he's got Jonathan Taylor in the backfield playing like he is, because right now that's the number one threat for any defense, and that's the number one threat that they have to focus on. So it frees up Daniel Jones a little bit more, I think, to open up the passing game and takes the pressure off him, at least. Anyway, when you've got a guy who's consistently churning out yards like Jonathan Taylor is, and touchdowns as well, red zone proficiency. Excuse me. I think this is another sort of, Tony Romo mentioned the Denver Chiefs game felt like a playoff game. I think this is another one of those games where it's going to, as you said, I think it's a big test for the Colts, especially go into Arrowhead. Weather's getting colder. It suits the Chiefs. It's not going to be, a blizzard probably there just yet, but it is getting colder. And I'd imagine it'll be pretty cold in Kansas City. And yeah, it'll be, as you said, it'll be a massive test for the Colts. I mentioned earlier the numbers for the Chiefs are solid. They're top 10 in everything, but they've lost 5 games. I've got the question written down here. Have other teams just been better than them? Has the level raised that much so that the Chiefs used to, we saw it last year where they won a lot of really close games and they got over the line in a lot of really close games. They haven't done that as much this year. And is that because the level is just raised, or do you think they've diminished a little bit?
I wonder whether it's a case of other teams have more star power.
Yeah.
Patrick Mahomes on his own is, another level of athlete. Travis Kelce is still performing, but he's not the Travis Kelce of old. And, I'm not saying that Rashee Rice and Hollywood Brown, they're good receivers, but I don't think the Chiefs have the absolute tear everyone apart star power that they used to have on offense. And I don't think they do on defense either. So, whether it's a case of the other teams are better or whether the other teams have more stars that break games, right? That Broncos defensive line can break a game. The Colts, maybe less so, but Jonathan Taylor can break a game on his own. Do the Chiefs have a player that can destroy another team on their own? I don't know if they can, unless Patrick Mahomes is firing all cylinders. And he's good this year. He's not to the level that he used to be.
Yeah, he's not dominating, is he? He's playing very well, but he's not dominating and being the face of the league, so to speak, this year. Whether that'll come later down the line, I mean, we all know if Kansas City are in the playoffs, they've always got a chance. It's almost like it's a different team, isn't it, once they reach January? So, but at the moment, if the Colts do win this game, it will be a huge statement win on the road, as we said, at Arrowhead. Really, really tough place to go and win, especially as the weather's getting colder. And that would really put the Chiefs up against it. That would put them below 500, and they would be in a real scramble to even make the play. They'd have to put together a big run at the end of this season. And if I'm the Colts in this game, coming off a bye week, it was a tough win in Germany, but I'm going there full of confidence. Having seen the Broncos beat them last week, I'm going there with, as you said, nothing to lose almost for the Colts, everything to gain.
Yeah. And I think, Sauce Gardner didn't play overly well in his last game out for the Colts. That, based on his career up to date, is a one-off, I would say.
Yeah.
Blip. And the Colts get Charvarius Ward back this week, who obviously used to be on the Chiefs. He's been on IR with a concussion, so he should be back at top level straight away. And I think, suddenly that Colts secondary is completely reformed from the first half of the season to now. And if that was their point of weakness, and they've turned it into a point of strength, that could be, a really, really difficult job for any quarterback, let alone Patrick Mahomes, to come up against.
Yeah, and a bye week for Sauce Gardner to fit into his new team and learn the defense and get a chemistry with his new teammates as well, right? So, can't wait for that game. Moving on to our second game, the Green Bay Packers against the Minnesota Vikings. The Packers 6-3-1, the Vikings 4-6. We just talked about the Vikings, so we'll start with the Packers. They bounced back last week with a win against the Giants after 2 losses. Still very much in the playoff hunt, the Packers, but they do need to find some consistency, don't they? This is the first meeting of the two this season. As we mentioned, some of those NFC North games are still to come. Where are you at on the Packers? They started really well. They've fallen off a little bit. Are they still the team we thought that they were in the first couple of weeks, or is there more cracks that have shown?
I think they're still a very strong team. They're third in the league on third down conversion, 49%, which is, a really, really good stat. The defense is scary. They're offensively, they've only given the ball away 7 times this season. They're not turning the ball over much there. So, I guess a bit like the Chiefs, maybe they're not flashy on offense, but they do the job. And on defense, that's particularly the defensive line, the pass rush is as a team pre-season, you'd have circled this game and gone, right, we need to make sure we've planned something. We need to make sure we've worked out how our pass protection is going to work for that game.
Yeah, I think the Packers as well, since the Tucker Kraft injury, they've really missed him. He's been a huge part of the offense this season. And is it Luke Musgrave is the backup tight end there? I mean, he's okay, but he's not Tucker Kraft. So it becomes more difficult. Yes, they have got Christian Watson back in the last few weeks as well. That is a big addition to this offense. Moving on to the Vikings, then we have touched on them, but yeah, JJ McCarthy, we alluded to, he really needs to step up now, doesn't he, and find some form, because I don't think this is a Vikings team that should be 4-6. I think this is a better team than that. That the stats don't read well. Vikings offense, sixth worst average in yards per game, second most giveaways as well with 18. That's been a huge problem, hasn't it? Securing the football and giving turnovers away.
Yeah, and another, much like the whole defense wins championships, another old adage in the league is the team that wins the turnover battle will win the game. Yeah. And as you say, they've given the ball away 18 times. They've only taken the ball away 9. So they're on, a -9 turnover. That is going to be a big problem. JJ McCarthy's thrown 8 interceptions in 5 games, which is normal for a rookie. But it's a tough spot to be in. They need to sort out that turnover differential if they're going to look to win more games. But I think the NFC North, and like most divisions, you can be the worst team in the division, but still end up beating more division games than losing, because there's that added rivalry, there's that added pressure for the teams that are good, and the added reason to want to put out a big performance for the teams that aren't so good.
Yeah, absolutely. And moving on to the third game in our preview, another NFC North team, the Chicago Bears at home against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Bears 7-3, the Steelers 6-4. Both of them leading their divisions at the moment. Aaron Rodgers currently questionable for this game with a hand injury. If he does play, he will return to Soldier Field to play the team he claims he owns, famously. A record of 24-5 against the Bears in his career, and now playing with an old school rival of the Bears. I know they're not a division rival or a conference rival, but these to me feel like two classic 70s and 80s hard-nosed football teams who would have faced off a lot in that period, and built up quite the rivalry. So if Aaron Rodgers does play, the Boo Birds at Soldier Field are going to be loud, I'd imagine.
Yeah, and I think the question for Aaron Rodgers comes down to, at the moment, he's been saying during the week, he's fine taking snaps in the shotgun, but it hurts currently taking snaps under centre. And I think unless they can get him to a point where he can take those snaps under centre, he probably won't play. That being said, he comes from the old ages of the NFL where they'll inject you with a painkiller and then you're all good anyway. That's sort of where he stands. I think, the Steelers have the 4th highest blitz rate in the league, and if they know what's good for them, they're going to send that blitz big time. That said, another good stat for Caleb Williams: he's got 7 touchdowns and 0 interceptions when blitzed this season. He is good against
that. That is a good stat.
And that's that creativity and that keeping the ball alive that we spoke about earlier. So, maybe 4th highest blitz quarterback that's good against the blitz could pay dividends for the Bears as opposed to, put them in trouble.
Both coming in off wins. Steelers beating the Bengals last week, and obviously the Bears beating the Vikings. Can the Bears take advantage of this off-color Steelers defense, shall we say? The Steelers, typically we're used to having a really, really good defense, but they've ranked one of the worst defenses so far this season. They have improved in the last few weeks, it has to be said. And they will have Jalen Ramsey in the lineup after he was cleared for his punch on Jamar Chase, after Jamar Chase clearly spat at Jalen Ramsey in his face and then lied that he didn't. You did, Jamar. It's on video. So they'll be backed by having Jalen Ramsey, won't they? Do you think that the Steelers defense is improving or is it still a lot of problems that the Bears can exploit? We mentioned earlier the Bears offense seems to be warming, or I mentioned it anyway. I don't know whether you agreed or not. Do you think this is still similar to the Ravens? They've been bad. Now they're starting to warm up again and find their feet.
I don't really know what to think with the Steelers. I don't know, that's not really answering your question. They're a defense made up of individuals. I don't think they play as a defensive team. TJ Watt is TJ Watt, and Jalen Ramsey does his thing.
Yeah.
But does the whole defense mesh in a way that, can stop drives, can win games? I don't know if it does. Bears defense leads the league in takeaways this year, 22 takeaways, which is ridiculous. And if Aaron Rodgers doesn't play, we could be looking at quite a feast of turnovers.
Well, Mason Rudolph was impressive against the Bengals when he came into the game last week, it has to be said. So maybe, I was thinking if Aaron Rodgers doesn't play, I've backed the Bears anyway, regardless of whether Rodgers plays or not. But I think if looking at it on paper, if Rodgers doesn't play, you'd really fancy the Bears. But maybe it's not as cut and dry as you'd think, because Mason Rudolph really played well last week.
Yeah, I suppose, and he's had a lot of time to learn and be in the NFL. He's learned behind lots of different quarterbacks who all know their stuff. I am looking forward to whatever the result is, the post-game press conference with Aaron Rodgers. I'm looking forward to whatever comes out of his mouth, regardless of the end of the game, because I'm sure it'll be gold.
Yeah, especially if the Steelers win as well. Moving on to the fourth game, the big NFC matchup between the LA Rams and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Rams coming in hot into this one, winners of 5 straight. The Bucs banged up and on a 2-game slide, and more bad news for the Bucs this week, as apparently a mystery illness has just swept the locker room, has affected around 15 players and 5 staff personnel, including Baker Mayfield and Emeka Egbuka as well. So just could not be worse timing for the Bucs, could it? They have to fly across the country to face the Rams, who are red hot and banging form. And the Bucs really need to be careful, because the Panthers are right there with them. And if they could take advantage of this, they might even, slide ahead of them in first place if they win this week and the Bucs lose. So, when you looked at this game on paper, it looks a really good game amongst 2 good teams. But with that news, you'd have to think that the Bucs are serious underdogs here.
Yeah, and between the illness, injuries, as you say, and by the sounds of it, based on a tweet from Mike Florio earlier, Bucky Irving's likely to miss the game for a non-football thing. Can you expand on that? But
so I read it, and it said, it didn't say much, but it said he's struggling apparently with being injured and being away from his teammates for the first time. He's never really had an injury that has taken this serious an injury that has taken him away from his teammates, and that has had a really adverse effect on him and his mental health, is what I read into it. It was fairly ambiguous, and obviously didn't go into too much detail, but that's what's been reported.
Yeah, that was my understanding as well. And then, and in sports, people don't necessarily talk about that sort of thing, so it's hard to get to grips with it. And Florio very cryptically saying a non-football thing doesn't really help. Hopefully, he can get healthy in the first place, and then being back with his teammates will sort him straight again. But they're in a tough spot, I think, injuries wise this week. Certainly on offense. Defensively, the Bucs this season are flying. Second fewest points allowed, 17.2 points a game on average. Second in turnovers as well. They're really in a good spot defensively.
Yeah, and they're going to need to lean on that defense in this game, aren't they, if they're going to stop the Rams? Obviously, the Rams are a very well-rounded team. But, having said all of what we've just said, I think back to, I can't remember what week it was, when the 49ers went to play the Rams at SoFi Stadium. I think it was on Thursday Night Football, completely decimated by injuries. It looked a sure thing that the Rams would beat them, and the 49ers, and we'll get onto the 49ers next, but the 49ers managed to do it. So the Rams that game, they've been excellent, but that game gave up one in a game that they should have really won. Could that happen here? It's unlikely, but you never know, right?
Yeah, and the Rams are 8th in total yards. They're 6th in points per game. We're looking at a game here that is potentially two really high flying offenses against two really high flying defenses. We're looking at two very, very good teams in a bit of a shootout. One thing to note, fantasy wise, is the Bucs have given up the 7th most fantasy points to the running back position so far this season, and they're about to play Kyren Williams.
Yeah.
So,
and he was scintillating last week, wasn't he?
Yeah, that could be, a massive game from Kyren Williams. And Devontae Adams has a touchdown in the last 4 games in a row. So he's finally found his feet since leaving Green Bay. I feel like he hasn't really. At the Raiders, he didn't look anything overly special. I think at the Jets, obviously, that didn't last very long. But he certainly seems to have gelled with Matthew Stafford now, and they're really sort of firing on.
Yeah, well, he's on a good team now, right? Raiders and Jets, not a good team. It does help, when you're on a good offense. But yeah, that this game to me, if the Bucs win that would be a huge statement win. And one they kind of really need to win anyway. But moving on to the last game in our preview section, the San Francisco 49ers against the Carolina Panthers. 49ers 7-4, third in the NFC West with 7 wins, which is crazy. And the Panthers 6-5, another big NFC matchup and a big test for the Panthers against a very good opponent on the road. 49ers decimated with injuries again this season, as we've mentioned, but they seem to have worked through them. We mentioned that win against the Rams when they were bang up against it. They found a way, haven't they, to get themselves to 7 wins with all the injuries they've had, and they're starting to get some guys back now. It feels like the 49ers are starting to warm up again and find some form.
Yeah, certainly, in some ways they've kept themselves going through the injury crisis, and they're now they've had it the good way round. You don't want to start having injuries now and losing players in your run into the end of the season. Now they're getting all of those guys back, and they should start to look, really quite good. I thought it was interesting. This is the first time McCaffrey and the Niners have played against the Panthers since the trade.
Yeah, of course. I completely forgot about that.
For a revenge game after a trade that I think was a surprise to everyone when it happened. It's his first opportunity to get back at his old team and really, to it. And the Panthers are 17th in the league against the run. They're essentially bang average against the run. Yeah. But I thought, McCaffrey could knock them a few pegs down on the league order by the end of the week.
Yeah, and my concern with the Panthers, as good as they've been and as impressive, as impressed as I've been with them this season, when they played the Bills maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, they got their asses handed to them by the Bills in a shaky Bills team. But that was a week where the Bills really played well, and I said that week before that game that was a test for that Panthers defense, and they did not pass that test. And I do think that the 49ers offensive power, especially Christian McCaffrey, could happen again here. However, one thing I will say about the Panthers, we've talked about them a lot. Dave Canales is doing a great job. Bryce Young was superb last week. I mean, that might have been his best performance in the NFL to date. Absolutely amazing. But inconsistencies for this Panthers team, and it's to be expected from a young team that is still rebuilding, who are probably they're probably overperforming at the moment of their expectations. So you can kind of see how that might be creeping in. They beat the Packers, and they lose to the Saints, and then they beat the Falcons again. Do you think this is a little bit too much too soon for the Panthers in terms of making the playoffs, especially in this really tough NFC, or do you think they are genuinely a contender for the playoffs?
It's tough. I think we often sort of ask the question: is this team the real deal yet? Is this team? And I think the Panthers. I think the Panthers are overperforming at the moment. But in some ways, the worst thing they could do is end up making it to the playoffs, ending up with a bad draft pick by virtue of doing so, when they haven't had many first round picks in. No, they've had tons of first round picks, and they've not overly worked out for them. The worst thing they could do is drop further and further down in a season where they are looking good, and maybe they do just need another piece on an offensive line. One thing to note in this game is both teams have bad pass rushes. Both teams are really struggling to get to the quarterback and put pressure on, which could mean that Purdy and Young both have really, really good games, because, certainly Bryce Young has felt the pressure a lot in his early career. But when the pressure's off, he performs really well, like he did last time. And I think Purdy coming back, in this big group of players that are coming back from injury for the Niners, the less pressure he feels, the better.
Will it be Purdy or will it be Mac Jones?
Well, Purdy's questionable to play, so it's yet to be decided, I suppose.
I'd stick with Mac Jones if I'm Kyle Shanahan.
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? When you're paying a player as much as they are, you sort of want to see them play.
I think Kyle Shanahan, though, is at the point where he's so desperate to win something. He doesn't care about the finances. He's not paying Brock Purdy. His job is to win football games. I think he'll put in who's the best person to help him do that. I think, he's got so close so often, hasn't he? First with the Falcons and now with the 49ers. I think he's just desperate for success, and who can blame him? But this will be a good game. If the Panthers, it could go one or two ways. I think if the Panthers turn up, it'll be a really interesting game. And the 49ers have been inconsistent. You mentioned the pass rush, the problems they've had with that. Or the 49ers will potentially run riot on this inexperienced Panthers defense. Yeah,
it's difficult. I think I really like this Panthers team, and I want them to succeed. But at the same time, I don't want them to shoot themselves in the foot and go too far and be in that spot where you're drafting pick 24 and you've got, all the best options off the board, and you end up having to reach on a guy that ends up not performing, It's difficult.
I don't know, because I see that there's a lot that they need still, but I think that if I'm the Panthers right now, looking ahead to the draft, you probably need to bolster that defense more than you do the offense right now. So even if you're picking sort of 15 to 25 in the draft, you can often pick you pick up quality defensive players in those spots, right? Who, I think that you think back at the likes of Brian Branch, I think went in that range. You can often pick, those type of linebackers, maybe a safety, elite safety or a corner. I think you can pick up good defensive players in that position. So I wouldn't be too concerned about that. And obviously they can try and trade if they really want to. But I do think, the Panthers, I have been really impressed with the job that Dave Canales has done. And if Bryce Young can go off that performance from last week, which was sensational, they're in for a real treat in this game, and they'll give the 49ers a real game.
Yeah, I think, we said early on in the season that Bryce Young needed to prove himself this year. And I think it's fair to say that Bryce Young has proven himself enough to get, more
get
time.
Some cash. Yeah, get some cash in the bank and buy himself some time.
Yeah, so that, at least that's anything else that comes out of this season's bonus. They now know that they're happy with that spot, where there's maybe one or two other teams around the league that are starting to think they're not happy with the guy they've got in the driver's seat.
Yeah, it'll be a fascinating slate of games. Again, let's run you through the full slate of games. The Titans take on the Seahawks. The Packers take on the Vikings, as we've said. The Ravens take on the New York Jets. The Detroit Lions take on the New York Giants. The Cincinnati Bengals take on the New England Patriots. The Raiders host the Browns. The Cardinals host the Jags. The Cowboys face off against the Eagles in Arlington. Another great NFC East matchup there. The Saints play the Falcons, the Rams against the Bucks, as we've mentioned, and the Panthers against the 49ers as well. Those are the two late Sunday night games and the Monday night games to look forward to as well. So thank you very much, Ollie, again for joining me, and we will see you again next week. Enjoy the weekend and enjoy the games.